in a world where trauma is real, where people seek out distraction from their internal lives and relationships with others, and where no one is taught healthy self-care. Help was needed. In 2019, the mission began. Find a way to help people understand and better their mental health. Seek out ways to explore relationships and how they work. Fight against the stigmas that surround counseling and therapy. And, most importantly,
do all of that so you don't have to be a therapist to understand it. Hey everybody. Welcome to Season 2 of Therapist Theater. I'm your host, Josh Treese. I'm a practicing therapist in Music City, USA, and every week a guest therapist, counselor, or social worker joins me here in the theater to talk about a movie that we've seen and what relationships or mental health issues it highlights. This week's guest is Cindy Hanna. Cindy's a therapist in Brentwood, Tennessee, who uses the emotionally focused therapy, or EFT, model to work with individuals, couples, and families to repair relational ruptures and create safety and trust. She's completed an EFT externship and core skills training, as well as trainings in emotionally focused family therapy and emotionally focused individual therapy. She's also a certified parent trainer in the trust-based parenting intervention. Thanks so much for downloading today's show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And while you're doing that, help other people find the show by giving it a 5-star rating and writing a review for it in the podcast app. I'll never stop running. Yeah? And I'll never stop chasing you. I'm relentless. I'm like the Terminator. I'm more like the Terminator than you. I said it first. You're more like Sarah Connor, and in the first movie too, before she could do chin-ups or dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
Welcome to the theater. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah. Well, I like to start my conversation with all of my guests by asking, why therapy? Why do you do what it is that you do?
Okay. Well, as you know, I got into therapy later in life.
Same. Oh, you might not have known that about me, but I mean, like, I started grad school at Trevecca when I was 35.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd already had one career, and I was coming to it as a second career.
I know, and I have found that super helpful for me because I was 50-ish, and but I came with a lot, of life experience. So I don't know if I had. I don't think I would personally have been ready just out of college. So everything I went through, my life and experience that I've had kind of pointed me in that direction and matured me in a way I know I would not have been ready as a younger person. But a lot of people are. There's some really mature people in that program. I was pretty amazed. But I was thinking about this question and how far back do I go, because your whole life, as I look back on it now, of course I didn't at the time, but kind of everything I can see like weaving through has got me to the place that I am now. When I was in my last 2 years of high school, I developed an eating disorder, and of course that had background to it. But just suffice it to say, our family did a emotionally process really anything. And so a lot of stuff went on. I had cancer when I was a child, and
Hmm.
a lot of things like that that we dealt with and I was taken care of, but we never really talked about the emotional piece of it. So really was I had no idea, how to handle
Yeah.
disappointment or any really anything, this negative, seemingly negative emotion. So my family was going through like a time. My dad had taken a job in another city. Um, we were trying to decide whether we should move or not. A lot of uncertainty, and I think I had some depression looking back on it now. But so I developed anorexia, and
Hmm.
that was I was I felt okay about that. I mean, it felt good. Like I'm in control. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
This is important value to my family, like looks and being thin. So, you know, that was fine. Um, but as I continued to lose weight, my mother noticed, but instead of directly addressing it, she just tried to, it's kind of like cat and mouse, like try to catch me not eating or uh,
Hmm.
something like that. So went on to college though, so never got counseling or talked about that or anything. And went on to college, still had that, and developed later in college into bulimia. And that was when I really started to hate that um, part of my life that had kind of taken over everything and really controlled me. And it took, I mean, it was really all I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Obsessive, obsessed over that. And also the lack of control in my own life. It felt like really an addiction because it was that whole compulsive cycle. And then like I'm not going to overeat. It was either eat nothing or binge.
So it's
So,
like all or nothing thinking. Like
yes.
I only have these two gears and I've got to cycle between those.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And just strictly control because I couldn't trust myself that I was not gonna binge. So super control uh, what I ate by not eating anything or else binge. So I that was hard and I hated that and it did feel
Mm-hmm.
like a prison. And that shame that was associated with it was so hard. I moved into an apartment after graduation from college and I remember my sister and mother visiting and opening the cabinet doors, and they said, "You have no food. There's nothing here." And that was because I'd gotten that far. I didn't want to have anything in the house
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't, or my apartment, because I couldn't trust that I would eat it all. So I ate when I went to work. And ironically enough, my degree was in food nutrition, so I was a clinical dietitian, which I guess does make sense. And I did real well. So that's all I thought about, and that was my job.
Was there any part of you that went that route because you thought it would aid in your ability to control?
It felt good to have that control,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to. I think it was a place for me to focus all
Mm-hmm.
these bad emotions. And that's how it started. I feel like, you know, and that gave me a sense of satisfaction, sticking to this. But then when it got to the point that I couldn't, as it progressed, and I couldn't stick to the plan and I couldn't control it, that's when it started feeling really bad. And then it
Yeah.
was a whole shame cycle.
It
Not going to. I did it. Now I feel horrible about myself. So now I'm really dysregulated. So here we go again.
that does sound a lot like addiction.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I've had I want to say one or two other guests on that have dealt in their practice a lot with eating disorders.
mm-hmm,
And there's several things that if we made a Venn diagram between addiction and eating disorders that would overlap in the middle there.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the main thing would be, that element of control and seeking to find a way to meet our own needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
whether meeting our own needs is by numbing them or avoiding them or whatever it is, but it's that I don't want to seek it outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
I want
Like,
to find a way that I can hit stop and start myself.
right, not it, a way to handle that emotional dysregulation that
Right.
I had of feeling, now that I think about it, I did notice, I recognized it a little bit then, but a feeling in myself that, I don't measure up, or,
Mm.
I'm not enough, or that pervasive sense, that I had. And so that's dysregulating to feel
Right.
that and to be faced in situations where that comes up. And then what do I do with this? I didn't know, like now, because of EFT, I didn't know to, to reach out. I
Yeah.
just thought, okay, it's up to me. I've got to try to figure this. It must be me. And so this makes me feel better. But then it did turn into something that I couldn't control. And, I think so that, and I'm coming up to the part why that's important is because that was such a shameful, horrible, secretive. No one knew that I binged and purged, and
Mm-hmm.
my sister did. She's 2 years younger than me, and we're pretty close. But she did her best, to try to help me, and she wrote out Bible verses for me and that kind of thing, which is
Mm-hmm.
super sweet. And that's all she knew to
Yeah.
do. And that didn't affect me. And I, so I just, I felt like that part of me is disgusting, um, vile. If anybody found out about that, they would think
Mm-hmm.
I'm disgusting also.
It's that
I,
shame message.
so much shame.
Yeah.
And I worked at UAB Hospital, and that's where I did my clinical dietitian work. And I remember picking up the phone once to call an eating disorders clinic. But see, this was 1987, and I'm sure they had resources there. And I was someone answered, and I told them what I wanted help for. And in my head, that person sounded so disgusted.
Mm.
And so I never pursued that.
Yeah.
That's just like, I don't know what was going on with them, but that's the story I made up in my head, because you would think someone who's answering the phone in that clinic wouldn't sound that way. But anyway, in my head, that's what happened, and that's how they sounded. And so I never pursued that again. But I, so I met my husband in the hospital, working in the hospital. He and I started dating. I, you know, we were in love, and I really felt like he loves me regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what's really miraculous. I, so no one knew about this, and I felt horrible about it, but I, at some point, risked reaching out, and I shared with him the struggle that I had. And I shared with him about this bulimia, and he was the first person that I let in on the most horrible, disgusting part of me. I felt like the
Yeah.
secretive part of me, and because he felt safe, I knew he was safe, and I knew he was not going to leave me probably, and he for sure like leaned in toward me and just hugged me and said, I'm sorry, and we're going to work on this. We can work on this. I'm here to help you, and however
Yeah.
you get help. And from that moment on, that grip that had on me, that compulsion and that addiction really started loosening. I mean, it was, now that I look back on it, it was what we worked toward in EFT. If you can
Mm-hmm.
let someone in on this very vulnerable, deepest fear part, because the fear is that people are going to leave me, find me disgusting, and I'll be here alone. I was at the bottom of that, I'm sure. And when he didn't, and he was there for me,
Mm-hmm.
it was, and I didn't even know what happened. I didn't know how it happened. I just know that it did. Like from that moment, it
Yeah.
was like, wow, like,
Well, it was like you decided to poke your head up into the sunlight and you had told yourself forever, it's a war zone out there. That's why I'm
right.
down here. And then when you poked your head up, you were greeted with a loving person who cared about you and stood beside you, and you
Mhm.
realized it was safe. And so it was almost like, oh, it's not as scary as I thought.
Yeah, yeah, like here he is. He
Mhm.
sees this worst part of me and he's not leaving. He's not disgusted. He's not going
Mhm.
anywhere. So, maybe I'm okay. Like a teeny spark of that, like maybe I'm not as bad as I thought. Maybe,
Yeah.
and so that really, from that point on, the compulsive part of that just slowly went away. I mean, by the time we were married, which we only dated 9 months and got married, and by the time we were married, that was gone.
Wow.
And I mean, I still didn't want to be fat and I exercised, but it
Mhm.
wasn't that compulsive um, piece of it. I mean, because it took a while for all parts of that to go away, but
Mhm.
the part that was out of control and the addictive compulsive part just went away. And I couldn't understand that until I started really learning more about attachment and got into that training more. And the more I learned, the more it made sense of how that happened, how that was such a miraculous
Yeah.
change for me. So fast forward, we did get married, had kids, 3 kids, and moved to Nashville from Birmingham. And I, at some point, took a job. Um, I had stopped working, and my kids were high school and middle school. I took a job at their school, local school, and was an administrative assistant. And a lot of people at that school were into international adoptions, and especially a specific orphanage in a lot of different places, but there were, at the time I worked there, a lot of people had adopted from an orphanage in Uganda.
Hmm.
And a local girl, Katie Davis, has written a book called Kisses from Katie. I don't know
Oh,
if
I
you
think I've
know
heard of
that.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She's from Brentwood, and she went there as a high school student and worked in an orphanage. And she was friends with people back here, and slowly word got out. And so 11 children from that orphanage live now in the Brentwood, Franklin, Nashville area,
Wow.
the same area. Yeah. So I was immersed in that, started reading a teacher's blog. And one day a little boy's picture popped up and it said his 4 best friends are leaving this orphanage and moving to Nashville. He's 5 and 4 or 5, and it has not been adopted. So
Mhm.
I had always thought about that, and or foster care or something, but it was never on my husband's radar. So
And you
we
guys had children at this point, right?
we had 3 kids, and at this point, they were 18, 17, and 15.
Wow.
So our oldest is a daughter and then 2 sons. Yeah, so they were older. And, but it had always been in the back of my head and kind of always wanted to do that. And so when I saw this was picture, and my husband and I had talked about it through the years, but saw that, I said, look at this, like, what do you think? And he read it and said, sounds like something it sounds like something we could do. So I got really excited and started all the paperwork, and 9 months later, we were in Uganda.
9 months later?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of symbolic. That's cool.
I know. It's so cool. And lots, paperwork and all that you go through for international adoptions. And went through all that, got there. We had to stay there for 8 weeks because they'd shut down adoptions,
Yeah.
the child trafficking things.
Now, did all 5 of you go, or was it just you and your husband?
Just me and my husband.
Okay.
I wish we could have gone, but the kids were in school. This was like spring time, and one son was a senior. My daughter was already out of school, and one son was a senior, and then the other was sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
So they stayed here. We didn't know how long we'd be there. They finished school, and we miraculously, which is a whole other story, got back just the week that son graduated from high school.
Oh, wow.
So we made it back for that. But then our lives kind of turned upside down because we've had some visits from social workers. You have to do home studies and all this, and some education, but we really had no idea about I didn't, even though we had some books to read and all that on attachment, it kind of went in one ear and out the other one.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a foreign language. I didn't really know what that meant, and I didn't know we carried attachment histories. Just the basic. I didn't even know that. So we come back, or even when we're there, it started they let Bobby is his name, stay with us in the place that we were staying while we were in Uganda. And from the first day, we could see there was something going on. It was just emotional and behavioral problems and defiance like you wouldn't believe. And so we made it through that time and came back. And then my husband went back to work, and my daughter wasn't here. So Bobby would, because of all the attachment related issues, would rage and just crazy, from my standpoint, behavior coming against me, hit, kick, push, just so much anger he had. And that was a really, really, really difficult time in our family's life, really hard. And, I felt like I was alone because I was actually alone during the day. And, it was hard for everyone to understand. I didn't know what to do. I really thought I'm going to have a nervous breakdown by the end of that summer.
Yeah.
And, I didn't know how to handle him. I felt no joy in that relationship with him. It was just so hard. And of course, he did it with me. I did with him. So eventually, though, I went to a Karen Purvis conference. I don't know if you know who she is. She wrote,
I think so, yeah.
Connected Child. She died of breast cancer a few years ago, but she wrote The Connected Child, which is well known in foster in adoptive communities. She's a developmental psychologist and kind of manualized all the research on attachment. And um, so I went to that. That helped. Started seeing a counselor for myself. And then wasn't until October, seeing me got home in May, that I went to a different counselor. And she said something about, I told her all the behaviors, and she said, well, I've never seen anyone with attachment challenges that could transition, that could accept a no. And so that was the first time I ever put those two things together.
Yeah.
We've been home 6 months. So started going to a play therapist with Bobby. He and I went 18 months every week, and really, really helped and was so healing. And I read as much as I could on, attachment, and found some, they recommended some books, read those. And one of the books is called Beyond Consequences, Logic and Control, and it explains what is going on in the brain of a child who exhibits these behaviors. And at the core is this fear. And that made sense to me. And after reading that and seeing, I saw him in a different way. And it was the first time that I really felt like I had compassion.
Wow.
Because I saw him as a scared child.
Yeah.
Instead of just a bratty, defiant, child who's trying to make our lives horrible. I could finally get into his experience, and that's when things started to change. And I didn't gradually, I didn't take the way that he behaved as personal insult against me, and I would handle something in the wrong way, think through that, and think, okay, next time I'm gonna, handle it this way that I know I should. And just over time, I think my own neural pathways changed, and so then I could be calm in the midst of his meltdowns. And then he started to change, and today, it's been 10 years, he's a completely different person.
Wow.
Sweet, very sweet. Listens. He obeys. I mean, like a normal seventh grader.
Plays Fortnite in the other room. So, I mean, truly a normal 7th grader.
Yeah, loves Fortnite. Connects with his friends on there. I mean,
oh, man.
Right now, how else do you connect? So,
I can't help thinking about, it seems like just in your story, especially with your youngest son, that there's a thread that connects back to you as a kid. Because as you described, I mean, your story, combating anorexia, surviving cancer, and you're saying, your family didn't do feelings.
Right.
So while physically you may be surviving what's happening without exploring what's going on inside, and I've said this to a lot of my clients, we don't come with a built-in manual on how to handle our emotions. Like, if our parents or our loved ones or our community or friends or whomever, but if we don't get taught how to engage with our feelings, we don't learn that on our own.
Right.
And so I would have imagined, I mean, I think I was picking up on this in your story, just the fear that you were feeling as you were coming up. And then especially, you described as you felt like you could no longer manage your eating disorder. It sounded like that, like, doubled the fear. Like, now all of a sudden, this thing that you're afraid of is out of your control, which increases the fear. And so I would imagine in the same way that you were having difficulty adjusting back then, your son being filled with fear,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right. Some of the things I read at the time, especially one said most um, negative. But, we focus on behaviors with
Mm-hmm.
kids and try to stop this behavior, clamp it down, whatever we need to do, because we have a lot of, basically, there's a lot of fear in us that it evokes, seeing that
Mm-hmm.
behavior. And then, yeah, to think, you know, my own fear, which I didn't recognize, um, was at the core of a lot of the stuff that I've experienced.
Oh
And
yeah.
trust, so you're right. Yeah, I get that. And that's true. This book was saying most negative, what we see negative behavior comes from a place of fear, a state of fear. So,
Yeah. I had a guest on a little while ago who is a counselor down in Florida who specializes in working with individuals who have autism and their families.
mhm.
And I felt a good her name's Janine. I felt a good connection with her because I have a little brother who has autism. And
Really,
I was telling her, I read a book when we were in grad school. It was like the first project that I got to choose in Dr. Hopkins's lifespan development class.
yeah, I love that class.
Um, but it was called Uniquely Human. And the author, is writing about working with people who have autism. But I think that this applies to most people. And
Mhm.
he was describing during the what comes at the beginning of a book, a prologue. Yes,
Yeah, prologue.
I always get those mixed up. He was describing at the beginning how, a lot of people use circular reasoning when they're talking about people with autism. They say, well, Mary has autism because she flaps her hands. Mary flaps her hands because she has autism. And he said that a lot of people will look at these individuals and they will kind of define them using behaviors that they would consider to be negative behaviors, like
Mm-hmm.
acting out behaviors. And he said, when you boil somebody down to uh, the sum of their deficits, it's dehumanizing them.
Yeah.
And he goes on in the book to explain, these behaviors that a lot of people look at as acting out in individuals with autism, or as maybe obsessive or over enthusiastic or whatever it may be. It's the individual's attempt at self regulation, at coping with the world around them.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you look at them in that way, what you begin to understand is the person, just like you or I, has stress, they have fear, they have things that excite them, but they're having trouble communicating that in a way that we in all of our glory deem to be appropriate.
Mhm. Yeah. Right.
you know
Right. And then we go out and do the.
yeah, and then when
Yeah.
you mentioned it, like when our fear, or I mean, what I think too, our shame gets triggered. Well,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't they listening to me? It must be because I'm not a good dad. It must be because I'm not a good mom. Even
Right.
though we're not saying that in the moment, that shame button gets triggered. And when we get into that, I had a buddy tell me one time this story about interacting with one of his sons, and he said when his shame got triggered and he didn't want to feel it, what he
Mm-hmm.
would do is try to transfer that shame to his son
Mm-hmm.
through anger.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you need to act your age. Didn't you hear your dad say this? And I can't believe that you're, da 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 da. Well, his son was, I'm going to make this up, but his son was like 3 at the time. So his son was acting his age,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's, you touched on it. It's that so much of our story, so much of our fear, or whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
like I don't even say it's the echoes of it because it's in the present too, but it's taking place in this new relationship that you have.
Right, right. Then we don't. I'm glad you said that about shame because
Mm-hmm.
I do think that is a huge part of it also. Um, and I know that it was, I mean, that's a dysregulating state to feel shame. And sometimes we feel it, it's just a kind of pervasive background
Yeah.
in our lives. And I think, you know, thinking about myself when you were mentioning that, talking about my mother who, and the way that she handled anorexia is, why don't you eat? You need to eat. Why aren't you eating? Why do you think you're fat?
More shame.
Yes. And like, if I could just eat, then it would be okay, which is not even touching on why, where is this coming from? What's
Mm-hmm.
motivating this desire to restrict your calories so much? So
Yeah.
that's where, yeah, that's where people, because it's easiest, I guess, we can try to stop this behavior. Then I can feel okay. And as a parent, I don't have to feel shame
Yeah.
if my child's acting
Yeah. That same buddy that told me that story said, um, the in his opinion, the best thing that a parent can do for their kid is to learn to deal with their own shame.
okay. Exactly. Yeah.
So clearly, you have this amazing and beautiful story of not only just like personal transformation, but in expanding your family, welcoming a new son, and then kind of a second metamorphosis as you seek to get him help. You actually transform more yourself. How did you go from like those experiences into I want to be a part of helping other people achieve that?
Uh, Good question. I, because of what I learned and was had to learn about attachment, and because of actually putting it into practice and seeing the result, and it just was so mind blowing to me, the power of a safe, trusting relationship. Like it was, the work was so much of the work that with Bobby was helping him develop a secure, safe, to think of me as secure and safe.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was constantly triggered otherwise. And so as I came to have compassion on him and really understand where his behavior was coming from and look underneath his behavior and see you're really a really, really scared, hurt, wounded
Hmm.
child here. And this is what he needs. He needs me to move in closer. He needs me to be with him in his bad emotions. That's how he feels safe instead of me moving away from him
Yeah.
and or being angry or punishing. I've got to be able to be present with him. I've got to deal with my own triggers, what is happening in me, and be able to sit there with that. So, in learning all that and seeing how this actually is true, then I thought I really always was I had been interested in counseling. From doing that work with him, I had also a good friend around that time who was my age. She went back to school, got a degree in counseling, got her master's. So, I thought that's what I always wanted to do. I really feel like I can help people because I get it. I
Mm-hmm.
understand. So, initially I wanted to focus on working with adoptive families. And I do have some. and I also see other people, individuals. But that was the reason that I went into it to begin with, because I have walked in those shoes. I get how devastating it is to your family,
Yeah.
to and how it looks on a day-to-day basis, and how exhausting it is. So that's the reason I
Wow.
decided to go back and get my degree.
You were given a gift and you wanted to give it away to others.
Yes,
Wow.
I can do anything to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah, I feel like,
So,
I mean, that it is such a exhibition of compassion, but I think it also is an exhibition of the high value that you placed on the work that you did, because
mhm,
you realized, this crucible that I went through, was a trying time, but the transformation and the healing and the love and the hope that came from it is more than worth it. And
right.
if I can, you know, help others maybe save a few steps,
Yeah, yeah.
not to take their own work from them, but to maybe save a few steps, then that's a worthy pursuit.
Well, and they say, uh, having an empathetic therapist goes so far in making therapeutic progress. Um,
Yeah.
so, you know, and then so that I knew that I could, if I could do anything else, I could empathize with the pain that people are in, and that's helpful. Um, and then I discovered EFT, and so I that fit in perfectly with everything I had to learn about attachment with Bobby, and how he healed fits exactly in with
Oh yeah.
EFT to me. So, because it's the same. It's an adult relationship with couples, but
Hmm. Well, it's built on the back of attachment theory.
right, right, and so Bobby had settled down. He had. I could not even have thought about going back to school the first 5 years that he was with us, but then once he really settled down and I knew he was in a good place, then I started thinking I could do that. So
Wow,
yeah, so it was
that's
good.
great. Well, let's talk about a movie.
Okay.
What movie did you bring for us to talk about today?
Well, it makes sense now that you know my story, uh, why I like this movie. Hunt for the Wilderpeople.
Let me just say that when you sent me the email saying that you wanted to choose this movie, like something bigger than joy, like it was like I think this line is from the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. It was like a glitter bomb exploded in my heart. Like my wife and I love this movie with our whole hearts.
It's so good.
And I have not said this about many movies on the show, but like if you're listening to this episode and you have not seen it, this is a movie that if you bought it before you watched it, you would not be disappointed. Like you would not regret that purchase.
Right.
It is so good. It
It's
is so
such a
good.
good movie. Such a good movie. And it seemed like it just went under the radar here. Do you think
Well,
it did in the US? Because
I think so. I mean, I think it started getting a lot more play after it was out because, like, Taika Waititi, that directed and wrote it, ended up doing a Marvel movie. He ended up doing Thor Ragnarok. And so,
yeah,
like, and that was after this. And so, once he started to get bigger, people started to look back on his other movies
yeah.
and they discovered that his other movies are like treasures.
Mhm.
Have you seen? He did another one called Boy. Have you seen that one?
Yes. I
Oh
love that
yeah. Oh my
too.
gosh. Yeah.
So good. And
Just
then
any of his movies are a win. Just
yeah.
buy them, watch them. I even said to my wife this morning, And I told her this was 65% serious.
Yeah.
But I said, I want to name one of our kids Taika. And she, and she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's just that, like, creatively he inspires me so much and his movies are so full of truth. And the look that she was giving me at the time, you know, it indicates that she may not be on board with that idea
Right.
yet.
But I would get it. I think that's a good choice. Yeah. I would get it. So
But
maybe you can put it in there as a middle name.
Yes. So what is it? Which, I mean, really, honestly, what you just said, knowing your story now, it's really, really evident. But what is it about this movie that made you want to talk about it?
Well, I just happened up on this movie, and I had thought about doing another one, talking about another one, but I never could really get into it that much. You know, in my head, I could think this would be good, but I don't know, in my heart, I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
Then I saw this one, and it's like, sort of after I saw it, I just happened up on it, and I thought, this is really quirky. Like, this kind of reminds me of Wes Anderson, that Moonrise Kingdom.
Oh, interesting. I have a lot of trouble connecting with Wes Anderson movies.
Yeah,
I have no trouble connecting with these movies, like with Taika Waititi. And I don't know
yeah.
what it is.
Something about it. I think it was the quirkiness
Yeah.
and
I feel like Wes
the
Anderson movies, like none of his characters are real people. And I
yeah,
always
yeah,
feel like in Taika's movies, they're real people. They're just weird.
yeah, yeah. But they're like
Which,
some.
yeah,
They're
which I
they're
feel
good.
at home with. Because, I mean, that's me. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I watched the first time and thought, just in the back of my head, like maybe that one. Watched it the second time and I'm like, I love this
Oh, yeah.
movie. This is it resonates. There's so much truth in this movie that about attachment, about what it looks like with this kid, this relationship. I mean, it's packed full that I didn't really see the first time. Um, and and then the landscape. I mean, that's the beauty in that movie.
Oh,
Of
my
the
gosh. Yeah. I think it was filmed in New Zealand.
yeah, it was. And so yeah, it's amazing. And what it's just how it plays out, and there's a lot that is embedded in it. When I look at Ricky, the main character, the kid,
Ricky
you
Baker.
know, Ricky Baker.
Do we have to sing the song? I feel like we need to sing the happy birth. I mean,
I know.
that moment, like everything
Oh,
about that scene is perfect.
I know it is perfect, and he
The
sings along with her.
yes, the jubilation that Ella has in singing and playing that song.
Yeah,
The like, I don't know, hesitancy that Ricky feels, like, is it okay that I like this? That I can I? And then he kind of, like, I don't know, he's being a little funny about it, and then Hector is just not
yeah.
enjoying the moment. I mean, it was
He's
perfect.
like, I know. Yeah, and I was thinking back because I kind of like took notes through this whole movie, but thinking when he first, the title has in chapters and it says a real bad egg,
Mm-hmm.
and that's you're thinking, oh, like, and he comes up in that police car, and then the child welfare worker goes down this list of, you know, what a bad kid he is, but it's funny too,
Yeah.
like spitting, stealing, defacing stuff.
Kicking. He just said kicking, and it shows him kicking a thing on the side of the street.
Yeah, it's so funny. And then you see him back, in the inner city, I guess, wherever he's from, doing all that stuff, graffitiing. But so, and then the mom, that Auntie Bella,
Mm-hmm.
runs out and she's so enthusiastic and so happy that I kind of felt this anxiety coming up in myself, like, oh, she's going to be disappointed. Something, like he's a little scary with this background, and I just felt myself getting anxious. But she's just like
Huh.
head over heels, just goes in there 180%, like, this is my kid. You're home. I'm going to take care of you. And which I think, of course, it's overdone, but that after for her to have that be reacting that way after this child welfare worker has just told Ricky, she said, there's no one else that wants you.
Mm.
If you don't, if this doesn't work out, like, get out of the car. If this doesn't work out, this is
Yeah.
Judy for you. And there's a lot of little harsh statements like that, even though it's comedy, kind of, it's still
Mm-hmm.
enough seriousness in that movie. That's what's so uh, genius, I think, about that movie.
Oh,
Like, it's
a
un-
100%. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I was trying to tell, my wife I wanted to name our kid Taika, was
yeah,
that he's so creative in that he can take what I think are extremely difficult um, situations and emotions,
hmm,
and I think about it like a beach chair that has the woven kind of things. He's weaving the difficult in with funny.
hmm,
And in one moment, you're laughing because Ricky tried to run away
yeah,
and got all of 200 yards or
yeah,
something
yeah,
before he gave up and just fell asleep where he was at.
yeah,
Bella comes and finds him. He and Bella go for a walk. He sees her like kill a pig or
yeah,
something. I mean, which
yeah,
I think is such an interesting contrast because when she comes out to the car, she is very like bubbly, friendly. Um, she's a lot.
yeah.
And then over the next, I don't know how much time passed, but over the next little while, I think she becomes who she really is
Hmm,
and still is over the moon in love with Ricky.
yeah,
But he's seeing her like when he wakes up after he ran away, she's sitting on the hill smoking a cigarette. And she's
yeah,
like, "Oh, you tried to run away, huh? Yeah, cool. All right,
yeah. Just sitting there with him.
Yeah, but you see Ricky now trying to like engage in this new world with Heck and
Mhm.
with Bella, and then all of a sudden, as him and Heck, no, he's walking back after going for a walk himself with they got him a dog. Oh, they got him a dog.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then he hears Heck like moaning.
I
It's
know.
it's this. I mean
So
I
real.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I was gonna say like I was watching it this morning, and I don't have any better way to describe it other than this guttural cry that a man who is not in touch with his feelings and has tried his best to not feel them for decades, all of
Mhm.
a sudden can't not feel them
Yeah, yeah.
because Bella, it appears, dropped dead while she was hanging the laundry.
I know. I know.
And
So
Heck is
powerful.
overcome with grief. He is bent over her, holding her, just
Sobbing.
wailing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's this evidence that, oh my gosh, Heck's wife, the person who Ricky, and you can see Ricky had already decided to trust her.
Yeah,
Like he didn't trust anybody. He had decided to trust her because of how she welcomed him and talked with
yeah,
him and related with him.
yeah.
So this person that means so much to these two characters is gone. And I think that's what you're talking about, the genius of Taika Waititi. That's it, is that he can take a situation like that and carry you through that situation into more because he is weaving in humor and he's
Mhm.
weaving in all the other emotions.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because that is in the movie. That's as powerful as any scene of grief in a movie, and yet it's considered a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's, yeah. I
And
mean, it's
don't get us
amazing.
wrong, it is a comedy, but
Yeah,
that's one of the very powerful scenes in this movie.
yeah, yeah. I was thinking about Bella and how quickly Ricky came to trust her. And so I was trying to break that down and like, how did that happen? And it's all the elements of um, like this circle of security is a um, group intervention research, whatever, and they've identified some elements of attachment, that through their research. But I thought there were a lot of things in there that really are true. Like she tells him that he's home from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like gives him hope. This kid that's been in like home after home after home, and her eyes lit up when they do when she looks at him,
Yeah.
and she met him where he was. Like
She
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 didn't
went to him when he was getting out of the car. She went to him.
Yeah, yeah. And said, we're going to be good. And I was thinking she met him where he was instead of making him change to their expectation. She,
Yes.
they let him she let him wear those white tennis shoes and on the farm and then that rapper hat. And, she didn't comment on that. And she had his room ready for him with all the things that she heard that he wanted. She pointed those out to him. Um, she had that hot water bottle in his bed
Yeah.
waiting on him that came to be something that was really like a security um, piece to him
Yeah.
because he carried it with him after he left and burned it. Remember that scene?
Yeah.
And you know, she took him into her life and let him go around with her, like you said, like took him out hunting
Mm-hmm.
and showed him how to use a gun. Which, if you have a child with that background, are you going to show him how to shoot a gun? No.
Yeah.
She did that. She trusted him, and then, like you said, with that
Oh.
dog, they gave him that dog. Like
Yeah.
they trusted, like you can handle this responsibility.
Yeah.
I believe in you. I I know that you're going to do the right thing. And that birthday, that scene, like you said, was so good. And he said, "I don't think I've ever had a birthday."
Yeah. Do you know
And so,
what? Do you know what? Like, it's right after that. I mean, something that hit me so hard the first time I saw it was she's tucking him in that night.
yeah,
Which, I mean, he's, I think, 15?
no, that was his 13th birthday.
13th. Okay, right. But he was a teenager. So she's tucking
Yeah,
him in and she says, I'm sorry it took us so long to find you.
yeah.
And like, even saying that now, I'm like tearing up because it was so sweet.
I know. She said something like, "I'm glad you're home, buddy. I'm
Yeah.
sorry it took so long." Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she kind of flicks his hand, and he flicks.
Uh-huh.
That was just so tender
Yeah.
and sweet.
It
And
seemed like Bella was not a character who was afraid to love.
right, like there was something in her background,
Yeah.
even though she may have had it tough, like Hector said later.
Yeah.
But there was somebody that instilled this sense of love and compassion
Yeah.
in her. And I think she, through her eyes, Ricky was able to see like a different version of himself. Like maybe I'm not the bad egg. She
Yeah.
sees me in this other totally different way that I am lovable and I am capable and I can be trusted and someone's paying attention to me and someone's interested in me
Yeah.
in my little poems. And so,
Which that's like such a great depiction of what secure attachment can be. Like that
yeah,
safe oh man, I always mess up the term, safe harbor, I think. But it's like I can go out into the world
Yeah.
I can explore. I can try difficult things because I know that I've got safety and security in this relationship.
Yeah.
Whether that's a romantic one or a parent one or whatever it is.
Yeah. Like I can carry this person with me and their view of me, and I can carry that inside me and see
Mm-hmm.
myself in a positive
And I think
way.
that's one of the big keys, their view of me, because it also means I don't, I don't, I'm not just able to go out into the world and explore crazy things. I can go into myself and explore crazy things,
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing that they view me with esteem. Like they view me positively.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an unbelievable gift, especially I would imagine for a foster child who he had a negative. He says a lot. My mom got rid of me.
Yeah.
My mom didn't want me. And so he carries that with him all the time.
Well, and he even tells a story about, I mean, basically being abused by a foster, I think, person he was with.
Yeah. Yeah. So he has that view of something's wrong with me. My mom got rid of me. I have to come to that conclusion. And
Yeah.
so here was someone else. And I was thinking, it's so easy for, um, and I see and I know a lot of adoptive parents whose kids, and then I'm on these Facebook groups, and their children's behaviors determine how the parents, they put that lens on,
Mm.
see the child through that. And so this cycle just gets worse and worse and never ends. And until you can see your child in a different
Yeah.
way, and that has to come from a place inside the parent
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do that.
Well, that's so
Because
much of what we talked about before. Like,
yeah,
if you view those behaviors as this is the kid trying to cope with the world around them, and they're
hmm
probably scared 24/7 and in a hyper vigilant, like activated state.
yeah,
And if you can deal with your own shame and fear that's happening
yeah,
concurrently with that,
yeah,
who knows the
yeah,
miracles that can happen. Strangely
exactly.
enough, everything that we've talked about with the movie happens in the first like 15 minutes of it.
Yeah, I know. And you're
It's
like,
it's not
what?
even the main movie, the
I
main
know.
part of it.
I know. You're like, why does she have to die? What?
Yeah. Oh, it would have been a different movie. So
Yeah.
like when he shows up at the house and Bella is being Bella and fawning over him, she also introduces him to her husband Hector or Hick. And Hick is he's a rugged man's man,
Mm-hmm.
very okay with being alone, probably prefers it, but Bella like says to Ricky, "You can call me Auntie, and you can call him Uncle." And then Heck is like standing in a doorway smoking a cigarette and says, "No, he can't."
Yeah.
And
Nope.
yeah, and it's this interesting marker because of where they end up. But like once Bella passes away, I mean, the social, I guess, children's agency, they don't just show up. It wasn't like Bella was the person taking responsibility for them. I mean, I think it was both of them, even though
Right.
Hector wasn't really doing it. But Hector kind of says, "I'm going to call them and have them come pick you up."
Yeah. Well, they
Um,
give us they send that letter, I think.
oh,
And yeah, they're like, we're coming.
okay.
We're coming. But
They do live out in the boonies, so like that's probably, I guess,
yeah,
why.
yeah. Yeah. And there's no trust between those two.
Well,
We're
there's no
saying,
relationship. How could there be trust?
right. No safety, no trust,
Yeah,
nothing. I mean, Hector has really offered Ricky nothing.
yeah.
Even his birthday, he just sat there like that still face experiment, like no expression.
Well, I mean, I think he had an expression. It was that of like pain and annoyance, and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
enduring this rather than enjoying being there.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
is it that so Ricky, I guess, I mean, clearly doesn't want to go to juvie, so he
hmm
decides to fake his own death.
Yeah. Oh, that was funny too.
Yeah, so he builds like a dummy of himself. I say builds. He like stuffs a couple t-shirts and he makes a paper plate face for it. And
Yeah.
then he lights the barn on fire? Is that?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So he throws the dummy in the barn and he lights it on fire. And he and his dog, who he named Tupac,
Yeah.
to reflect its true nature,
Yeah.
they go off into the woods
Hmm.
to get away. And Heck, I don't know if does Heck go after him or is Heck just in the woods and happens upon him? I don't
I
know.
know. It's
Yeah.
surprising. He looks for him, but I think he goes and looks for him. And yeah, and then their journey starts. And, it's interesting to see how slowly, through a lot of cringe worthy uh, things he says to Ricky, their trust slowly
And
develops.
vice versa.
Yeah. And yeah, because you think in a way, they're so alike. Those two are really so alike. Both have a horrible backgrounds. And both lost this person
Mm-hmm.
who's super, dear to both of them. And they're both kind of without anyone else in the world except each other.
Yeah.
And, I think it was pretty interesting that scene after she dies and they're standing underneath the clothesline and they're both standing the same way with their hands on their hips or something. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you noticed that. And that's when Hector says, I'm going to the bush for a while, I'm gonna disappear. And
Hmm.
Ricky says, yeah, that sounds like me. And they're standing there. I just
Wow.
think that has to be intentional
Yeah.
because they're a lot. Even Hector, is not parental at all. He's more like a buddy, but not like a friendly person, but even
Yeah.
almost Ricky's own age. It's like he's not, there's no caregiving parental part of him that shows up.
You know what's interesting is, we've talked about EFT just a little bit. And like we've talked about EFT on the show enough, emotionally focused therapy.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about it, we've got some past episodes talking about it. But
Yeah.
um, when Ricky escapes into the woods, into the bush, and
Yeah.
Hector comes upon him, Hector is at first like, I'm taking you back. You're coming back with me.
Hmm.
It's not so much like we're going to embark upon this adventure.
Right.
It's more like you have inconvenienced me and I'm going to take you to where you're gone and I can go back to being alone.
Yeah.
And Ricky doesn't want to go because he knows where he's going to end up.
Yeah.
And he says something to Hector about don't you need a map or something like that to where it comes out that Hector can't read.
Hmm.
And Hector's probably, I mean, they don't say, but I would assume late 50s, 60s maybe.
Yeah. I think
Like he's
somewhere they said something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Like he's played by Sam Neill, who was Dr. Alan Grant in Jurassic Park. So I mean, like
That's
he's
crazy.
he's an older actor, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but oh my gosh, Jurassic Park 1990 was Jurassic Park 90 to 2000. Jurassic Park was 30 years ago.
Oh,
Holy cow!
that man, he's in good shape to
Yeah,
be that age
yeah,
because he wasn't. I don't even. I forget what he looked like in Jurassic Park, but I don't think he was young.
yeah, yeah. So so Ricky finds out Hector can't read. And then he kind of like picks on him a little bit, and you see Hector get the kind of Marty McFly fist tightening, like, don't say it. You better not say it. You better stop saying it. So he
Yeah.
goes to make a run at Ricky, I guess to grab him by the collar or something. I mean, I don't know what this adult was planning on doing with this child,
Yeah.
but he ends up tripping over a rock and basically breaking his ankle.
Hmm.
And I think that's where things change because up until that point, exactly what you were saying, Ricky has his arm up. He's keeping Hector at an arm's distance. Hector has like both arms and a couple of feet up. Like he's keeping everybody as far away as he can.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, he does not have the privilege any longer of keeping Ricky away because he needs him,
Yeah.
because he can't walk.
Yeah.
And so they have to like camp there. You know, Ricky has to find him something to make a crutch out of. Like he needs him. And so really like at that point in time, and it reminds me, you know, as we were talking about EFT, about the cycle that happens between a pursuer and a withdrawer. Like the first thing you do to break that cycle is you get the withdrawer to show up.
Right.
And all of a sudden Hector, who between the two of them is like king emperor withdrawer.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to go to the bush for a couple of days. Literally, you know, all of a sudden he has to show up.
Yeah.
And that's what starts the change.
Yeah. And yeah, the last thing he wants is this kid to have to take care of, or even to have he doesn't know, I would assume, how to have a relationship. I mean, he did with Miss Bella.
Did he?
I guess.
Because, I mean, even when Ricky shows up, like, you know, the first time he even sees Heck, his head is like, not even his head, it's a pig's head. It's like bobbing over this hill as he's walking back because he had been out in the bush.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And gives no greeting or anything. Just walks up. Yeah. So their relationship is a mystery, but apparently he loved her.
Yeah.
But I think he doesn't, maybe besides something there, you know, he doesn't want a relationship there. And I wonder, you know, is there fear there? Like, I don't know how to do a relationship. I don't want this. This is scary for me. Like, what? This is foreign territory.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I want you to go away. But you're right. After he falls and they have to stay there for a while, I noticed like one of the turning points is they're around that campfire, and he says, you know, would you miss me if I got lost? Ricky asked Heck that. And he just doesn't answer. And then he says something like, well, don't get lost. And he says, do you miss Auntie Bella? And then he never answers. But then Ricky tells him about that girl in foster care who died.
Yeah.
That was his friend, you know. And so they're there together and they're forced to be together. But I felt like that was kind of a turning point when Ricky was kind of letting him in on some of the stuff going on, you know, inside of him.
Do you think that those were bids for connection from Ricky? Or do you think that, like, it was him just running his mouth?
I definitely think, would you miss me if I got lost?
Yeah.
I think he's wanting to know, do I matter to you?
Yeah.
Like you say terrible things to me, but he seems like he kind of takes it tongue in cheek almost. Do you think that?
Yeah.
Like he's
yeah.
bad things.
Yeah, it's like he kind of realizes, and maybe it's because of being around Heck and Bella together, but he kind of realizes, all right, Hector is really, really gruff, but if maybe this is what it was, there's something that Bella loved about him.
Yeah.
And I loved Bella. It's the oh gosh. A equals B, B equals C, so A equals C. Something transitive property. It's the transitive property of love. That's what it is.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but
maybe maybe that's what it is. But it's like I know that whenever my wife and I were dating and getting married, one of the things that always struck me was how people in her and my family too, but her family could love me without knowing me in a way that I thought it would take to love me.
Right.
And the same thing is true with my family for her, but it was because we love her so much and she loves him. So that's good enough.
Yeah.
You know.
That's good. Uh-huh.
And maybe that was something that helped Ricky, I don't know, that like gave in his mind Hector a leg up, because if Bella loved him so much,
maybe he's okay. Yeah,
yeah,
there's something there. Maybe there's something there that's
yeah.
worth sticking around for.
And throughout their ensuing adventure, there are times where Hector, you know, teaches Ricky, protects Ricky, um, and vice versa, where Ricky protects Hector and teaches him, you know.
Wow, and he really protects him. Like he stood when that wild boar was coming
Oh,
after
yeah.
Hector had fallen. He stepped in front of Hector,
Mm-hmm.
between Hector and that crazy wild animal,
Yeah.
and shot him. And I thought that was really significant because that was on into the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it just showed like, yeah, I mean, their trust in each other and their relationship is growing and has come such a long way from
Yeah.
what it was to
And
begin with.
and it showed how
Yeah.
much Ricky valued and loved Heck, because that really was a willingness to sacrifice himself
Yeah.
for Hector.
Yeah. Like you mean that much to me,
Yeah.
right? And that was huge.
What
And
other parts of the movie, or what other things from the movie are significant and stick out to you that you wanna talk about?
you know, I guess that the first hut they went to, and when he picked up that Ricky picked up the book about and had wildebeest in it, and it said, "Is it true they travel 1,000 miles?" I don't recall it.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah.
He said, he said that's just like us, walking, looking for a better home. I thought that was so sweet. He had
Yeah.
already put, he's with Hector
Yeah.
there. Like he sees them as a team and they're together, even though at that point Hector hadn't. But, we're just looking. I just thought that's really, really poignant.
We're just
How,
like them. We're the wilder people.
yeah, we're the will, let's
Not the
call ourselves.
wildebeest, the wilder people.
Yeah, yeah. And um, then I thought, when Hector decided to let him stay with him after he heard Ricky, actually heard him, and Ricky said, "Everyone ignores me. I'm going to go to juvie, and the same thing's going to happen to me that happened to Amber."
Oh.
That fear in his voice, and I thought it was so good because that's the first time that you really see Hector tuning in to him and listening and kind of catching, yeah, he's really afraid,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want that to happen to him either. And so, all right, let's stick together then. And from then on, it was different. He wasn't trying to get rid of him.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
at the end, where Ricky goes to Hector and they are deciding to stick together, and Ricky says, "I got one rule. You have to let me call you uncle."
yeah,
And he had already said at the beginning when they first met, no.
yeah,
And Hector says, "Okay."
yeah, yeah. So he had that had touched him too, and then the haiku that he wrote, said about we're me and this fat kid. I wrote it down. Me and this fat kid, we ate, read books, and it was the best.
Yes. Oh.
That was so good. It's because that was the language of Ricky.
Yeah.
That's how he expressed some of those really hard feelings that he had. And that was significant because Hector had um, obviously valued that and then shared it back with Ricky.
Oh my gosh, Cindy. What you said about Bella earlier. Bella went to Ricky. That's what Heck did in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and at the end, when it shows them going off into the bush,
Uh-huh.
and you can hear them talking, and the camera's going up, he says, he changed from what he said earlier, and he said, Hector says something to him and says, Ricky says, "I don't know what that means," and he said, "That's gangster talk," because he knew Ricky
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was so good too. He's reaching to meet me where he is there, and then Ricky says, "Yeah, we didn't choose the Scuck's life."
Yeah.
And
It chose
Hector
us.
says, the Scuck's Hector says it. The Scuck's life chose us,
Yeah.
and scoffed at that earlier. And so, just super sweet ending, and he finally came around, and that bond, that attachment bond was there for
Yeah.
both of them. That in
So
this one,
good.
both they both saw a different person in each other's eyes.
Yeah.
Because Hector saw the trust this kid had in him
Mm-hmm.
and the positive way and the desire he had to be with him, and that had to have. I mean, that must have been the reason. I mean, the huge impact that had on him.
Yeah.
No, this kid trusts me, wants to be with me, thinks good things about me, and yeah, it's amazing.
So good. So good. Just buy this movie. If you haven't seen it, just buy it. You'll be so happy you did.
Yeah, and Bobby watched it with us. It's definitely, if you have um, adolescents, there's some bad language, but not
Yeah.
tons. And do you think?
Well, so I mean there are I would say not much. I think if you're a parent and you are wondering, should I show my kid this movie or any movie? A great resource for you to know what's in it is if you go to imdb.com and you
Mm-hmm.
type in the name of a movie and you scroll down a bit, there's something called the Parent's Guide, and users rate on different categories what it has in it. So like sex and nudity, violence and gore, profanity, alcohol, drugs, smoking, frightening, intense scenes. Profanity, it says moderate.
Okay.
But I would say also for me, I tend to think if you're a parent, like anything that you show your kid, you're going to hopefully be talking with them about. And
Right.
so if there's language in it, talk to your kid about the language.
Yeah.
But I almost think that in this movie, there's something about the language that is there that's not, I don't know why I'm thinking of this word, malicious.
Uh-huh.
Like it's
Yeah.
not necessarily people, saying terrible things about each other. And if it is, it's showing how that is not okay. That's hurtful and and something about that rings different to me than like a Quentin Tarantino movie or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Those. Um, I agree. And one other thing I've thought of is, when this child was dropped off, that home is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So they had electricity, I don't know how, and no
Huh.
internet, I assume, no cell phones. So,
I don't know if you
I,
noticed on the side of the house was a rain collecting reservoir.
oh no, I didn't notice
It was a
that.
little like not little, but it was a big metal tub that was near the top of the house that collects rainwater.
Wow. And then that outdoor toilet they had.
Yeah.
They so for Ricky to go from immersed in popular culture, rappers, and these were his role models.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm just going to leave and I'll go back and probably be in a drive-by shooting or be a gangster. Fine, that's what I want to do. And I thought that was the world that he knew at the time. Those were his role models. Tupac, all these people I don't even know, and to be dropped off where there's no social media, no television, no nothing from popular culture that he had was in touch with anymore, and how good that was really for him in that situation. And then to travel, walk through the bush with someone, I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
To somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's and just to do that for 5 months. I
Not that it
mean,
was done by choice, but yeah, it
yeah,
was really.
wound up being such a good way for him to kind of get away from all that and his role model at the end, he was so proud that he could be a bushman
Oh yeah.
and learn all those skills of
Mm-hmm.
surviving. And I think that's significant too, because most of the time you wouldn't have an opportunity, or most kids, to get away from the influences that are around them, so they may continue to go down a bad
Yeah.
path. But since he was completely, like picked up and dropped down away from all of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's clear that Ricky learned a lot from Hector, and Hector learned a lot from Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, tell me something that you've learned from your clients.
Um, you know, I have there's a few things, but I guess one thing I've learned for them that empowers me is when they are able to be vulnerable, like cry or reveal, like a fear or longing. Um, it softens. I see a lot of individual clients. It softens my heart toward them,
Hmm.
and that helps me then to be reminded that because I have my own. I could, how like in your own relationships in real life with my husband, it's I would want to hold back or be defensive,
Mm-hmm.
um, not go to those places, just push my point across. Even though I'm a therapist, sometimes that still comes up, and so that is a
Well,
good reminder.
you're a person first before you're a
Yeah,
therapist. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that helps remind me that to push through that
Mm.
fear, risk to being vulnerable with my husband, because that is that ultimately gives me what I'm looking for, which is connection.
Yeah.
Because I feel it with my clients when they push through and do that. So that empowers me knowing that they're able to do that in a session, and that the result is good.
Yeah.
And
I think
so that,
so much of our education in grad school was talking about things like um, whether it's kind of explicitly or like implicitly, but modeling to the client. We talked a lot about modeling boundaries, modeling healthy relationship, modeling intimacy, things like that. But I think what I'm hearing you say, and I've found this a lot in my practice as well, so much of the client modeling the courage to seek help, the courage to show up, the courage to speak that dark, deep, shameful thing for the first time, that it's
right,
inspiring.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like a constant reminder in our lives that it can be done.
yeah, like that wasn't easy for them, and now look at the result.
Yeah.
And it is true that it helps and it is connecting, and to show that softer side. And but it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's still scary. I still feel anxiety in my stomach. But that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I can push through. I can talk about that even. And it's worth doing. So
Yeah.
you're right. That's very empowering. And then yeah,
Yeah. Well, I don't care who you are, whether you're a therapist in their first month or whether you're, I don't know, like Irvin Yalom, who's like 95 and still seeing clients,
wow.
or whether you are a lay person, a normal person out there, intimacy is scary.
Yeah.
It's scary because it's literally giving the inside parts of you that you're afraid to show to somebody else.
Right.
And it's receiving from them the same thing. And so like if the thought of that scares you as a person, I mean, welcome to the club of being a person.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because that's all of us.
Yeah. And most of us have spent our lives avoiding these bad feelings and or not even recognizing them, but just feeling a vague sense of something that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I've got to get away from it. So,
Yep.
yeah, you're right.
Tell me something that you do to take care of yourself.
Well, it's changed a little bit, of course, during this pandemic,
Yeah.
but I have always loved to work outside in my yard. And I'm telling you, this spring, we've planted so many bushes. It's crazy. And our yard has never looked better than it does right this moment. But, so I love doing that.
Did you take pictures?
Do I take pictures?
Did you take pictures of your yard? You said it never looked better than it does at this moment.
No, I haven't taken any.
You need to take some pictures because you know what's crazy? I don't know if you remember this. I know that a client mentioned it to me the other day, and I was flabbergasted that I didn't. But you know, a tornado came through Nashville not too long ago. Isn't it crazy that is tough to remember right now?
Yeah.
But I mean, if if you put all that work into your yard and it looks better than it ever has, get out there, take some pictures of it so you can remember.
Yeah. Well,
in the fall.
Yeah, that's true. I just hope. I mean, I don't like my husband and I digging holes, or so we got little bitty bushes. A lot of them are really small, so it'll look better when they grow some. But the hard part is July and August when it's super dry, September, and we have to go out and water them. That's the drawback. But right now, is the fun part is planting, and so I love doing that. That's so good for me. I try to go. I'd much rather do that than do anything inside my house.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. Yes. I thought you were going to say something about like now having your own bush that you can go out into. Just like heckin' Ricky Baker.
That's an idea. I just do that. Get lost up on a big rock.
Well, let's say that.
Like that, I definitely would.
Yeah. Well, let's say that somebody was listening to the show today and they are just thinking to themselves, man, I just love Cindy. I think I can connect with her. I'd love to become a client of hers. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can find me at, I am part of Red Therapy Group, and we have a website, redtherapygroup.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest way. And then when you get on that website, or you can also email me at cindy@redtherapygroup.com. But you can choose the website, has different pages, and you can choose like the therapist that you want to book an appointment with. And you can even do that online. So that is a great way.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Cindy, before I say goodbye, I want to give a movie recommendation to you.
Okay.
It's one that my wife and I just watched, I want to say last week, and it reminds me so much of this movie.
Okay.
But it's called The Peanut Butter Falcon.
Peanut Butter Falcon.
Yeah, it just came out last year. It's got Shia LaBeouf in it.
Okay.
And it reminds me a lot of this movie, and it's got two people going on a journey, and there's attachment stuff, and it's funny, and it's cute, and it's sweet, and it's great.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to look that up. Maybe that'll be my activity for tonight.
Oh, yeah. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so glad that I got a chance to talk with you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
Of course.
So great just having a conversation and get to know you.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to make today's wrap up pretty short and sweet. When the show first started, the wrap up was a place where my wife, Leanne, who is a social worker, would come on and we would discuss the interview. We would discuss her thoughts on the movie. And it was just a brief section of the show where more thoughts could get added and thoughts that had been communicated kind of summarized. But since Leanne stepped away from the show, I've tried to make the wrap-up a place where either I can highlight something that was talked about during the interview, or I can put something additional out there. And sometimes it's been a thing that I had hoped would help you engage with the show, that would help you connect with the show, a question to answer, a way that you could interact. But I mean, to be quite honest, it hasn't really seemed like that's been something that has been appealing. And so I'm turning my brain over trying to figure out, why that is. Maybe it's because when you get done listening to an hour and a half long show, you don't want to get through a 10-minute, wrap up. You want to move on. So I'm turning over, changing up the format just a little bit. It is because the show is made for you. It is my deepest desire to be able to interact with you, to be able to engage with you, to hear from you. What are you getting out of the show? What would you like to get out of the show? What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? What do you like? What do you not like? Actually, leave that part out. You don't have to tell me what you don't like. But I'm turning over in my head. Maybe it's time to switch things up a little bit. Maybe ditch the wrap up. Maybe do it in a different way. Maybe shorten the show. I don't really know. But I do know this. This is the 71st episode of Therapist Theater. Holy cow. When I started this show, I don't think I, even thought it would make it past a few. I hoped it would, but I, just wasn't that sure. Thanks so much for joining me this week in the theater. I'll make sure I save a seat for you and a friend next week. Let's raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.